Tonight at 10, just 2 weeks after taking office, Rishi Sunak suffers his first cabinet resignation. Sir Gavin Williamson has faced growing claims of misconduct, including bullying and harassment of colleagues and officials. Sir Gavin, seen here on the left, was appointed to the cabinet despite the Prime Minister being aware of some of the complaints made against him.
All that means just 2 weeks into office, serious questions for Rishi Sunak about his judgment.
Yes, we'll have the latest from Westminster, where 2 investigations into Sir Gavin's conduct are already underway. Also tonight, in Qatar, a senior football ambassador says that homosexuality is damage in the mind and that visitors to the World Cup will have to respect the country's laws. The fight for power in the US Congress as Trump and Biden rally the party troops for the midterm elections.
Ding dong, you're not wrong.
And Leslie Phillips, best known for his roles in the Carry On films, has died at the age of 98.
Also tonight here on BBC London, Protecting Women and Girls, a new campaign aims to empower boys and teenagers to call out sexism and misogynistic attitudes.
Good evening. It's taken just 2 weeks to prompt the first cabinet resignation of Rishi Sunak's premiership. A short while ago, Sir Gavin Williamson resigned as a senior minister following days of allegations about his conduct. He said he aimed to clear his name of any wrongdoing. Downing Street was already investigating accusations of bullying and harassment, and Sir Gavin has also been reported to the parliamentary authorities over allegedly abusive messages to a Conservative colleague. Earlier today, Downing Street insisted that the Prime Minister had full confidence in Sir Gavin. But Rishi Sunak, who promised a government of integrity and accountability, now faces more questions about his decision to appoint Gavin Williamson in the first place. Our political correspondent Damian Grammaticus has the latest.
It was exactly 2 weeks ago that Gavin Williamson was brought back into government on the very first day Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister. A controversial figure, mounting bullying allegations have now forced him to resign. In his letter tonight, he wrote, "I refute the characterisations of these claims, but I recognise these are becoming a distraction for the good work this government is doing. I have therefore decided to step back from government so I can comply fully with the complaints process that is underway and clear my name of any wrongdoing." On the steps of Downing Street, Mr Sunak had made this pledge.
This government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level.
But he was criticised for having round his cabinet table Gavin Williamson and others thought to be there as reward for supporting Mr Sunak's bid to be party leader. Allegations of bullying by Mr Williamson have mounted since the weekend. That he sent expletive-laden text messages last month to the then Chief Whip. That he made bullying comments to a civil servant. Both figures have lodged complaints. And his former Deputy Whip tonight claimed he acted unethically in a threatening manner and spoke of using MPs' issues such as financial problems to pressure them. As they arrived for their weekly cabinet meeting this morning, ministers were saying the complaints process should run its course.
Well, as you know, there's a process going on. I'll leave it to them.
But the snowballing claims throughout the day short-circuited that. In his reply, Rishi Sunak tonight said, "It is with great sadness that I accept your resignation. I support your decision to step back and understand why you have taken it." The opposition parties say Mr Sunak's judgment has been poor.
It's right that he's resigned, but I'm afraid it doesn't end here because this is just another example of Rishi Sunak's weak leadership and poor judgment. Now, he appointed Gavin Williamson despite knowing the very serious allegations about his conduct, and yet he repeatedly expressed full confidence in him.
Gavin Williamson was brought into government first by David Cameron. He was sacked as Theresa May's Defence Secretary for leaks, sacked again as Boris Johnson's Education Secretary. Now he's out for a third time.
He's fallen on his sword, and clearly that's the right thing to do. I'm glad he's taken that decision. If you are the story, you're distracting from everything else. So well done, Gavin. And Rishi's got my number if he knows who to appoint next.
Prime Minister.
Last week, Rishi Sunak faced attacks in Parliament for his choice of Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. Tomorrow he's back in the chamber and facing little doubt more criticism of his choices.
And the really difficult question, I think, for Mr Sunak tonight is that one that he knew there was a complaint against Gavin Williamson before he appointed him that day 2 weeks ago, but he had not inquired about the substance of it. It's why opposition parties are trying to say that there is little difference between Mr Sunak and his predecessors, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. So he will face questions about that, and questions too about Suella Braverman, who remains in the cabinet, but remember, had to resign just a week before Mr Sunak brought her back in. Hugh.
Damien, many thanks again. Damien Grammaticus with the latest there at Westminster. With just 12 days to go to the start of the Football World Cup in Qatar, there are renewed doubts about the suitability of the Arab state to host the tournament. Now, Sepp Blatter, the former president of FIFA, football's governing body, said that he'd always been of the view that awarding the World Cup to Qatar had been a mistake, as the country was too small, he said, to host the event. And there's been worldwide criticism of remarks by Khalid Salman, a former Qatari professional footballer, now a World Cup ambassador, who said that homosexuality was damage in the mind, in his words, and warned gay people that they would have to accept the country's rules when they visited. Qatar has been consistently criticised for its stance on same-sex relationships, its record on human rights and its treatment of migrant workers. Our sports correspondent Jane Dougal has this report.
In Qatar, this could see you in prison or even given the death penalty. This protest is to pressure FIFA ahead of a World Cup in a country where same-sex relationships are illegal. And just days before the tournament begins, an ambassador for the World Cup, Khalid Salman, has told a German broadcaster that homosexuality is haram, which means forbidden, but he went further, denouncing same-sex relationships.
But do you think gay is haram?
It's haram. Because why is haram? I am not one big Muslim, but it's haram. Why? Because it's damage in the mind.
At this point, a World Cup official steps in to bring the interview to an abrupt halt. His words have upset many, including Helen Hardy, founder of LGBT football team Manchester Lacys.
It was so definite, what was said, and so deeply offensive, and I don't think it could be taken any other way. So we're quite clear on how they feel about LGBTQ plus people.
The 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
It's been controversial from the start. There was widespread criticism 12 years ago when Qatar was announced as the hosts. The then FIFA president, Sepp Blatter, has since been banned from football over a corruption scandal. And speaking to the BBC for an upcoming 5 Live podcast, Blatter admitted Qatar had been a mistake. Not because homosexuality is outlawed or their poor human rights record, but because of the size of the country.
It's a big organization which needs also a big country. Qatar is too small to do that. I said to myself, I was right at a certain time to say we should not go there.
The danger to LGBT people has prompted England captain Harry Kane to join with Wales captain Gareth Bale in announcing they will wear a One Love armband for the tournament. It's prompted a wider debate about sports washing.
As an England supporting homosexual, it is not safe for someone like me to watch the World Cup in Qatar. Exactly. Because of the human rights abuses of migrant workers and Qatar's LGBT population, I personally don't think Qatar should ever have been awarded a major sporting competition.
More than 1 million visitors are expected to travel to the World Cup. Organisers have said everyone is welcome, but Khalid Salman's contradictory words have raised more questions over the safety of LGBT supporters. Jane Dougal, BBC News.
Now, tens of millions of Americans are voting in the midterm elections, in which the Republicans are hoping to gain a majority in the US Congress, which could then put a block on President Biden's agenda and quite possibly pave the way for Donald Trump to run again for the presidency. Now, Congress, quick reminder, is made up of 2 houses. You have the House of Representatives and then you have the Senate, lower house and upper house. Currently, the Democrats have a majority in both of these houses. Every seat in the House is up for election, and polls are suggesting that the Democrats could lose control there, and a third of the Senate seats are being contested. Now, what about the topics of discussion? Well, cost of living, abortion rights, immigration, levels of crime. They're all issues that have dominated the campaign. In the US Senate, well, things there are particularly tight because it really is split 50-50 between Republicans and Democrats, with the Vice President, the colleague of Joe Biden, of course, Kamala Harris, holding the deciding vote. Now, when we look at key races, we can certainly look at these to watch, as they're frankly too close to call. The end result in terms of balance in Congress may well be down to these. And of course, in terms of control of the Senate, they will be absolutely vital. So, in a moment, we'll talk to our North America editor, Sarah Smith, in Washington. First, to our correspondent, John Sudworth, who's in Philadelphia, in the state of Pennsylvania. And John, Pennsylvania, such an important battleground.
It is, Hugh. I'm in McGillen's Old Ale House in downtown Philadelphia. In the next few hours, people will be turning up here. They'll be able to watch the results unfolding on the big screens. And they'll be watching, believe it or not, from a pub that dates back to 1860, the eve of the American Civil War, and an event that some people, of course, see dark echoes of in today's divided political landscape. Those divisions have been evident in this state throughout this campaign, in particular in a key Senate race that pits Dr. Mehmet Oz, a Republican slick celebrity TV doctor, against his Democrat opponent, John Fetterman, a man who's been living out his own personal health crisis through this campaign, having suffered a stroke earlier this year. And that's complicated the race. It's left the polls too close to call. So this is one state, one of the few that could have a real bearing on the makeup of Congress and on a key question. After these midterms, will President Biden be able in any way to govern effectively, or will he be left as a lame duck president for the remainder of his term? And one other final quick detail, Hugh, there is already legal wrangling in the courts here in Pennsylvania over a small section of mail-in ballots. That tells you not just how close things are in this state, but also how politicised the process itself has become.
John, many thanks. Let's cross to Sarah in Washington. That's the scene in Pennsylvania, Sarah. How does it look there in Washington in terms of the importance? What's at stake here in this set of elections?
Well, President Biden says nothing less than democracy itself is on the ballot this year, in a country where many people still believe that the 2020 presidential election was stolen. Republicans are convinced that voters are more concerned about the economy than about democracy, and that's why they are pretty confident that they will win a majority in the House of Representatives. The Senate, as you say, really is too close to call at the moment. Even if the Republicans only win the House, they will still be able to block almost every piece of legislation that President Biden proposes, and they'll probably also try to impeach him, even though they haven't decided what they want to impeach him for yet. We will start getting results tonight, but we won't get all of them in, and it's quite important to remember this, because a lot of postal votes can't be counted until the polls have closed. It will actually be a few days before we know the final results. And it was a delay just like that in 2020 that led to those claims of electoral fraud, because at first the results that came in on the night, Donald Trump appeared to be ahead, and then when they counted more of the mail-in ballots, Joe Biden overtook him. And that's where some of those claims of fraud came from. And already today we've heard about cases in Maricopa County, Arizona, where some voting machines haven't been working. They've been fixed now, but that's already set off claims that there is cheating and fraud going on in this election.
Sarah, many thanks again. Sarah Smith, our North America editor. John Sudworth for us there in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. By the way, you can watch all the results as they come in tonight on our US midterms election programme. It starts on BBC Two from 11:15, or indeed you can access it via the iPlayer app as well. Now let's move on to another of the day's main stories. Job vacancies in adult social care are at record levels. The Alzheimer's Society says that the system in England is in gridlock, and there are concerns that the welfare of those living with conditions such as dementia is being put at risk. 1 in 10 care jobs is currently vacant, and that's a rapid rise since last year. Wages for people working in social care start at the minimum wage of £9.50 an hour. Many find themselves overstretched, doing overtime, in many cases for no pay. Now, the shortages mean that more than 500,000 adults are waiting for the care support that they need. Now, earlier this year, our correspondent Jeremy Cook went to visit Dr. Jo Wilson, who's in her 60s and has dementia. She's looked after by her husband, Bill, at their home in Newcastle. They now have lost the support that home carers had been providing, so Jeremy has been back to find out how they're coping.
Oh, up, stand up.
We first met Bill and Jo back in the summer.
All right, well, no, don't sit down again. Stand
She is living with Alzheimer's. Both are living with the impact. Their story struck a chord.
I had the most phenomenal, worldwide response to that.
People would be thinking that things couldn't have got worse for Bill and Jo.
I'm sitting here today, Jeremy, saying things have got dramatically worse.
Worse because the carers who were coming in twice a day
Up you get.
are now not coming at all.
And the sad thing was, they had only just recognised that we needed more care.
They actually withdrew all care.
Everything.
Newcastle City Council tell us the care provider they use simply doesn't have the people to care for Jo.
The system has written Jo off.
For Bill, it's a new low. But Jo was already getting some daycare help at the Bradbury Centre, which is run by the Dementia Matters charity.
This is lovely.
Its CEO, Bev Reid, could see that Bill was struggling and stepped in with extra help. The staff now give Jo her supper.
Have a little bit more your tea. No, I'm quite a bit.
And get her dressed for bed. But after that, it's back in the car.
Seatbelt on.
Every night, Bill copes alone.
Things have got to the point where I really have to consider residential care for Jo. It's not what I ever wanted to happen. I want Jo here with me.
But the Bradbury has its problems too. They've prepared a new residential care bedroom, perfect for Jo, but still empty.
We can't have Jo here as a resident until all the approvals process is complete.
Frustrating delays at a time of national shortages of care home beds.
It's just a sin, really.
Approval comes from the Care Quality Commission, which says it cannot compromise safety for speed.
We can put a respite bed in here.
But the Bradbury also has 2 respite rooms standing empty, also waiting for the paperwork.
We were reassured.
Space that could help free up desperately needed hospital beds.
When you see a queue of ambulances, think social care.
That's simple.
It's that simple, because it's social care that's blocking those beds or preventing those beds being reused for medically urgent cases.
Right.
The dramatic changes in government mean still more uncertainty.
Get you tucked in.
For the care sector, for Bill and Jo, and for so many families like them.
Unless we can actually do something and force that change to start happening now, we're going to be talking about this very same problem in 20 or 30 years' time. Good night then. There is no tomorrow for Jo and me. Our tomorrow has come and gone. Good night.
Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Newcastle.
Now, at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt, China has said it'll plant 70 billion trees by the end of the decade to help counter climate change. But a report backed by the UN has made it clear that developing countries and emerging economies will need far more to slow the rate of global warming and to cope with its impact. Now, in 2009, richer countries agreed to provide £100 billion a year to developing nations for climate action by the end of 2020, which is this strip here. And as you can see, by the end of that year, it had only reached around $83 billion. The goal is now expected to be reached in 2023. Not only are the existing promises of climate finance not currently being met, but developing countries argue that these targets are also too low. And today, a new report from the UN says that developing countries needed $2 trillion annually by 2030 to tackle global warming. Our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, has this report.
You can't move for global leaders here in Egypt. There's John Kerry, the US climate envoy. and the former governor of the Bank of England.
How big an issue is climate change?
Billionaire philanthropist Michael Bloomberg isn't talking, but Nicola Sturgeon is. She says developed countries have a duty to help on climate.
I don't think any of us are doing enough yet.
Island nations in places like the Caribbean are already battered by hurricanes. Climate change is likely to make those storms even more intense.
Profligate producers of fossil fuels have benefited from extortionate profits at the expense of human civilization.
The Prime Minister of Barbados is leading efforts to reform international financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to make it easier for developing nations to access cash for climate.
Justice and solidarity. Justice is simply about fair play, and solidarity. Without solidarity, small countries, small people like me can't make it. I believe that this is a conversation whose time has come.
Today, the work of the conference begins in earnest. An army of diplomats and lawyers seeking agreements.
This is the main conference hall where the leaders speak, and as you walk around this truly vast convention centre, you get an idea of the range of issues under discussion. There are lots of representatives of the fossil fuel industry here too. There is pressure to have gas defined as a green fuel, yep, because it's lower carbon than coal and oil. And there are hundreds of businesses here too. Today, the UN announced an effort to stop greenwashing, companies pretending to be environmentally friendly when they're not really. With so many issues on the agenda and so many opposing views, finding compromises is going to be hard, but it will be the only way to make progress here in the desert sands. Justin Rolat, BBC News, Egypt.
Back home now, more than 70,000 lecturers and other staff at 150 universities across the UK will strike for 3 days later this month. The University and College Union says the walkouts would take place on November the 24th, 25th and 30th. The union is involved in a long-running dispute about pay, working conditions and pensions. The United Nations has called for the immediate release of the British-Egyptian pro-democracy activist Alaa Abdel Fattah from prison near Cairo. Mr Abdel Fattah, who's 40, has escalated his hunger strike by refusing to drink water since the COP27 summit started. Our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley has the story.
Alaa Abdel Fattah is Egypt's foremost human rights defender. His family say he looks nothing like this anymore, that months of hunger strike have left him skin on bone. He rose to prominence during the Arab Spring of 2011 and became an icon of the revolution, but hopes that this would be a turning point that ushered in a proper democracy were thwarted. This was Alaa Abdel Fattah in 2013, holding his son Khalid, surrounded by supporters. The following year he was jailed for allegedly organising a protest. He was released in 2019, but was back in jail within months after sharing a Facebook post about the torture of another prisoner. He spent most of the past decade behind bars. This is where he's now being held. His family have had no news of him since his last drink of water on Sunday. His younger sister Sanat flew to Sharm el-Sheikh from London to lobby for his release.
We don't know anything. I don't know if he's alive or not, but I'm telling myself he can't be dead.
What's your message to the British government?
Do your best and show that it's serious and that it will affect the relationship, and do your best. You have a duty to your citizen, and this is also insulting for you.
Yesterday, Rishi Sunak met Egypt's President Sisi. Downing Street says he stressed the UK's deep concern about Alaa Abdel Fattah. Egyptian officials say they're offering him food, drink and medical treatment, but are still refusing to allow the British Embassy access to him.
Abdel Fattah is in great danger. His dry hunger strike puts his life at acute risk. And there is a lack of transparency as well around his current condition.
There's been silence today from the Foreign Office. Britain and Egypt are important allies with trade and military ties, and the government's been criticised by both opposition politicians and former diplomats for not putting more pressure on Egypt over his case. His family no longer believe he has a future in Egypt. They now just want him safely out of jail, out of the country, and in the UK with his 10-year-old son. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
Now, tonight has seen the highly anticipated gala premiere for the latest season in the Netflix series The Crown. Part of the pre-season material shows events leading to the tumultuous breakup of the marriage between Charles and Diana. Our arts correspondent David Sillito has more details.
A Netflix TV series with the full Hollywood glitz of a red carpet premiere. The Crown has become landmark television. But the reason this forthcoming series has been so talked about is because this is the story of when media attention of the royal family was at its peak, the turbulent years of Charles and Diana.
Well, come on then, let's blow them away.
Sir John Major said one episode is malicious nonsense. Dame Judi Dench asked for the series to make clear it was fiction. And official royal biographer William Shawcross is simply appalled by its portrayal of events.
It's a beautifully produced, very lavish and expensive piece of propaganda directed against the monarchy.
This forthcoming series has attracted particular press attention.
Because it's dealing with people's lives now, all the most hurtful times of their lives, and particularly their divorces, and especially, of course, the divorce of the then Prince of Wales and Princess Diana, which it goes into in painful detail, always accepting the Diana side of the story and portraying Prince Charles as really a nasty piece of work.
They don't know how the world has changed, and everyone's just blaming everyone else.
The team behind The Crown disagree. Dominic West, who plays Prince Charles, feels opinions will change once people see the series for themselves.
A lot of people are very sensitive about the show, especially since the Queen died, and I think a lot of people are worried that of what might be in the show, but I don't think there's any need to be.
I do think it's fair to both sides, and I think it is extremely empathetic of both camps.
Royal divorce, the annus horribilis, this was always going to be uncomfortable for the royal family. But this is more than history. It's about today and reputations. David Sillito, BBC News.
The actor Bill Treacher, who played Arthur Fowler in the first decade of EastEnders, has died at the age of 92. He was one of the first actors to be cast in the soap, appearing in the very first episode in February 1985. In one memorable scene, he explored the nature of mental illness when he admitted stealing some money.
What have you done? Been out and robbed a bank?
No.
So where did you get it?
It's the Christmas Club money.
What?
I'll pay it back, Pauline. Every last penny. I'll pay it back somehow.
His family said he was a brilliant actor, wonderful husband and father, and a very fine human being. Bill Treacher. Now, the actor Leslie Phillips, best known for many appearances in the Carry On films, has died at the age of 98 after a long illness. Phillips was also familiar to younger fans as the voice of the Sorting Hat in the Harry Potter films. Our entertainment correspondent Lizo Mazimba looks back at his long life and successful career.
Take a look at me.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hi, Tony, I'm Eve.
He was the cad, the bounder, the ladies' man. It made him a star.
Hi, girls. I'm available.
Mr. Bell,
Ding dong, you're not wrong.
this way, please.
His comic technique developed in the theatre, but it worked just as well in 3 early Carry On films, on television and on radio.
Surely I don't have to go to bye-byes.
In.
The Navy Lark ran for 18 years from 1959.
The Navy Lark with our 3 stars, Stephen Murray, John Pertwee and Leslie Phillips.
Up a bit. Up a bit. To me. To me. From you. Think of a number and double it.
Despite the posh accent, he'd been born a Cockney before achieving huge success with his rakish on-screen persona. But he felt he became typecast.
It was marvellous, really, to get those sort of roles, and they seemed important then. It was only later that I realised I was getting into a kind of a rut.
I'm sorry to know that Kenya will be losing you.
In his mid-50s, he reinvented himself as a serious actor.
If I were in a hole,
You'd be the sort of chap I'd turn to.
And also delighted a new generation of fans as the voice of the Sorting Hat in Harry Potter.
Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor!
But for many, he'll always remain the old-fashioned flirt.
Ding dong.
With a twinkle in his eye.
Oh, you sexy beast.
The inimitable actor Leslie Phillips, who's died at the age of 98. Time is 10:30 and Louise is here with the latest on the weather. Hi, Louise.
Hi there, Hugh. Good evening, everybody. Well, if you can just open the curtains before you head off to bed, you might get a glimpse of the amazing full moon at the moment. Clear skies for some, not for all of us. We still do have a few scattered showers around, most of the showers out to the far north and west, and they will tend to linger as we go through the night along that south coast. But we keep those clearer skies. The wind direction has changed a little over the last good day, and so that's going to allow those temperatures to fall down to single figures. So a little bit chillier first thing tomorrow morning, and hopefully a little bit drier as well. Lighter winds to begin with. There's showers just lingering in the far southeast, a few scattered showers, but the winds will ease into the afternoon across England and Wales. Those showers will really become few and far between. More persistent showers in the far north of Scotland, still incredibly mild for this time of year, 11 to 15 degrees through the middle part of the afternoon, but going to get milder still as high pressure starts to push in, and it's going to block these weather fronts that will sit into the far northwest. Also, it is going to drag up this very warm air coming all the way up from Africa. So over the next few days, as we close out the week, milder still, can you believe it? At this time of year, that southwesterly flow will drag a lot of cloud, some mist and drizzle along west-facing coast. Some very heavy rain sits across the northern and western Isles, accompanied by gusts of winds 60, 70 miles an hour here. But look at the temperatures, 11 to 17 degrees the high. That's 63 Fahrenheit. Warm by day, but even warm as we go through the night. Now, record November minimums looking at around 15 or 16 degrees across the country. Look at this. As we start Friday morning, we may well see some record-breaking temperatures through the night. It could be the highest minimums ever recorded for November. Hugh.
We shall see. Thanks very much, Louise. Louisa, with the latest on the weather, that's BBC News at 10 on the 8th of November. More analysis, of course, of the day's main stories coming up on Newsnight, which is getting underway on BBC Two now with my colleague Victoria Derbyshire, and they'll be talking about Sir Gavin Williamson and his resignation. But here on BBC One, it's time to join all my colleagues in the nations and regions with the news where you are. But from the 10 team, thanks for watching and good night.